Pedro, when he writes, he likes to tell you the story as he's writing it. Many times he's, kind of taking me through different scripts. One was the film, a great film, Talk to Her, where he was writing it, and he started telling me the story, and I said, well, go on. He said, well, I'm in the middle of it. And then he just started filling in all the blanks, and he basically told me he acted out the entire film over dinner. Yes. There's a scene where someone goes inside the woman's vagina and is walking around, and I'm eating, and I'm like, really? I mean, and he acted it out, and it was a fantastic. It was just me and him, and when I saw the film, I loved it, but I said, well, I've already seen it, so
This is such a treat. I can't wait to ask you about this. I think this is a very special movie. I'm curious to hear how it's special for you.
Well, I know Pedro for about 30 years.
Wow.
And so we've been friends, and I'm a big fan of his films, and he's been an admirer of mine, and many times we would go out to dinner, and Pedro, when he writes, he likes to tell you the story as he's writing it, and many times he's, kind of taking me through different scripts. One was the film, a great film, Talk to Her, where he was writing it, and he started telling me the story, and I said, well, go on. He said, well, I'm in the middle of it, and then he just started filling in all the blanks, and he basically told me he acted out the entire film over dinner. Yes. There's a scene where someone goes inside the woman's vagina and is walking around, and I'm eating, and I'm like, really? I mean, and he told me he acted it out, and it was a fantastic. It was just me and him, and when I saw the film, I loved it, but I said, well, I've already seen it, so and he was trying it out on me, actually, and it's one of my favorite films of his, and I just, was someone from Matador, and What Have I Done to Deserve This, Woman on the Verge, and Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down, All About My Mother, It's My Secret Garden, and I've always met all the different actresses, Victoria Abril, Cecilia Roth, Penelope, and I admire Pedro because he was always outside of the mainstream when he started, and he grew up in Franco-controlled Spain. So when he sent me the script, I've always wanted to work with him, and I've worked with Julianne, and I'm a big fan of Tilda's, and he said, oh, it's not the biggest role, but it's really important. And I said, listen, it doesn't really matter. I would do, I'd play a waiter or something for you, because these are people that have affected you as an audience member. So I realized there were a lot of things that represented Pedro, talking about certain things at a certain time in your life. And I've also been through a lot of loss too. And I thought, well, this is a beautiful treatment of it. It's about female friendships, which I think are more frequent in life as life goes on than male friendships. And asking someone to go out of their comfort zone. And I think, I don't like serious subjects when they're not handled sensitively and with a gentleness. And I think when we all go through this, it's a long inch by inch process, sometimes full of heartbreak, but also laughter and absurd, crazy things that happen. And I felt that, when I read it, I said, well, this kind of passed the smell test for me. And I had just lost, my brother when he had sent me the script. And it was someone who I took care of. I was my brother's guardian for many years, and because he suffered from, mental illness. And so it just kind of struck me in a way. And I also thought, there's so many films I've been in where the women have always supported the men. Where the men have the big meaty roles. And I thought, well, even though you don't see me with Tilda, she talks about me and stuff. So that was enough for me. So I thought, well, that that's something that's unusual, and sort of and you have to be able to parachute in and be able to, be someone who wants to help, but also brings their own baggage with them at the same time. And that's very true in life, because I think sometimes people want to be helpful, but they don't necessarily, they're not reading the situation completely, but they're trying their best. And these are really hard situations. And I've been in a bunch of them with friends and things. And, you might want to recommend the doctor. You may want to go and visit them and kind of make them laugh at a certain time. And, it's something that we all face. And so I thought it's a movie about something. And of course, in Pedro's world, everything is heightened. His language is heightened, even in Spanish. And we had to work with him, on the translation, because there is sort of a formality to it. But, he's able to do these brilliant things like, when Tilda puts on that red lipstick, before, I just think, he's able to do these things. He has the audacity. And so, it was a privilege to be with. And Julianne and I have worked together. So that made it really easy.
Yes, I definitely want to ask about Julianne, and I want to ask about baggage, because that's what actors want to hear about. And thank you for sharing.
Oh, really?
And thank you for sharing about your brother. I really appreciate. I think that we're going to get to the heart of kind of how you relate to all your projects, but specifically for this one, you mentioned that Almodovar is so outside the mainstream.
Well, that's when he started. He certainly was. Yes. Was it inevitability that you would work with him, or was it a hope? Like this? We've always gotten along really well, and and he's always made me meet basically the actresses, never the actors. So we've always had a nice, relationship and friendship over the years. And, I actually asked him in the second film I directed, Illuminata, to play a critic, actually. But he got really nervous about that. And he said, no, my English isn't good enough. And, but I just get a kick out of him. I think he's, even when he's very emphatic about something. And Tilda had worked with him before, and he did a couple shorts in English. He's always, he was interested in Brokeback Mountain. He was interested in that film, and a couple other things too. I think The Paperboy, but he would always get cold feet. And so I wasn't going to miss that opportunity, because, life is more than about the size of the role or whatever you're doing. It's about the encounter you have with your fellow workers, and your fellow, collaborators. And
speaking of, I love this story of he's enacting his entire movie to you. Was there anything like that with this? What was his description of the character? I imagine it was very collaborative to make this.
Yeah, he told me the story and, where the person fits in and, but I knew there were certain things that were in his mind about climate change, about being older, about still wanting to have sex, and all these things. And I was like, well, basically like Pedro, I'm basically a version of Pedro in some ways, I do that a lot with directors. I would look at the director and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to basically, be him,
That's so exciting.
Yeah. I've done that with certain movies that when the script was very thin, that's different. But he's a writer director. So there's a different, so you kind of know, like, well, this means a lot to him. And I think, the things he brings up, like, how much do you give up in life? And we're all, faced with that. Do we not drive one day a week? Do we take more public transportation? What will you be willing to give up? I always think, if in this country they said, well, you can't do something one day a week, that'd be a revolution probably. But, it's a good question to ask, to actually say, in a movie, and I thought, wow, that's something interesting. And that's what the guy does. He goes around and gives speeches, and lectures.
Yeah, and we weren't in the room to hear the kind of reactions to your character kind of talking about that climate change. But I'm wondering, did you all find that, was there nervous laughter? Was there laughter? Was it like, how comedic, I want to ask you about comedy, because I think this is a great example of like, how do you make room for it? Or did you make room for it?
Well, that's up to you. You know what I mean? That's up to the audience. I always think, there's some things that are maybe funny to you and may translate or whatever, but obviously it's between you and your partner and knowing what the sensibility or sensibilità is of the filmmaker. You know what I mean? And you don't want to fracture that and go outside of that, because I've been in those situations where, actors like in another movie, you know what I mean? And you're like, well, we're not that, you're not in our movie, So you have to be aware of that and, and play with your partner. Julianne is one of those people that it's so easy to play with her. When I did Gloria Bell with her, it was just, she's delightful, to work with. And we had a lot of like sex scenes in that movie, and we were, and then we would like be talking about our kids right afterwards and stuff like that. But she's a real, I've worked with a lot of wonderful actresses, and sometimes I think for me, it's sometimes easier than working with guys sometimes. Yeah, guys, they can be really giving, but there's always that competitive spark, of like, I got to get mine in there. And not always, but it's, I like working with ladies. I do.
What did you learn from Julianne Moore this time around? Like, what is she like as a scene partner?
She's just she's just there. She's fully there, and very sensitive to whatever you do. And, giving, and it's just, we have a real chemistry, and it's easy to work with her. And even our husband had said that. He said, "You guys have such a good chemistry," and I think that's when you're working together. I've had that with certain people. I have that, when I do Severance with Chris Walken. It's, Chris and I've directed him, we've acted it, and it's so easy to be in love with Chris, because I love Chris. I really do. And we have fun like we're first graders. We're like, look at each other like, oh, what's going to happen, and sometimes Chris doesn't even understand like the plot, and he, and he'll ask me, like, I don't understand this scene, and I'm like, Chris, I said, you don't have to worry. You're into me and I'm into you. I said, that's the main thing. You just say those lines, and and with him, it's like, he's like a jazz player, and Julianne is a different kind of musician, but it's like making music together. The musicians have to listen to each other, and I think actors have to listen to each other, and you learn that. You learn that a lot of times the most interesting thing in a scene is the space between the two people. Not what you do or what I do, but what happens between them. And I think that's kind of a joy of life, when you connect with someone. Yeah.
Beautiful. I was going to ask for Severance Season 2 spoilers, so thank you for like a little tease.
I can't. I'm
just
sworn,
a nice little tease.
I'm sworn to secrecy.
I bet. You get to sever your...
Ben Stiller owns part of my brain.
Yeah, your brain. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. I'm so intrigued. I think that I maybe just speak for myself, but I think because there's other actors in the room, this idea of you playing the director or the writer of a movie is so fascinating. And especially for a project that maybe things are a little thin and you need inspiration.
Oh, right. You want me to
We're not going to name names. No.
Well, no, I mean, for example, when I did all those, I'd never really done those big franchise movies. When I did Transformers with Michael Bay, you would ask Michael a question and you said, well, what are we doing in this scene? He goes, well, you'll understand when you see the movie, And so I just watched him, and I watched his body language and his energy, and I just said, well, I'm just going to be Michael Bay, that's it, man. I'm like, and whenever I would do something that was close to like as Michael, his behavior, he would love it, because loved it. Because that's so funny.
I think that's...
Like, yeah, because they basically mirroring you, And then his mother came to the set one day, and I sat with his mother, and I said, tell me about Michael as a boy. Yeah, and, did he like to play baseball? And so he was like so nervous. He kept saying, why are you talking to my mother? Why are you spending all the time with my mother? I said, because I want to know about you, And, so, yeah. But everyone is different, so that's kind of the fun of it.
I mean, I think it's actually brilliant acting advice, and I don't think it's acting advice I've heard of, that if you are not necessarily just if you're lacking inspiration, but it's like, this is a movie that's being made by that person.
That's right.
So if you're channeling that person, to your earlier point, that other actor's doing some other movie. Like, you're doing the director's movie by channeling them.
And also, we did a lot of improvisation and stuff like that, and I just liked the way he moved. So, I was like, a lot of times people reveal themselves in their movement, not what they say. And it's so contradictory. You're like, oh my God, I'm gonna steal that,
Sure.
So, but that's, human behavior is full of contradiction.
Where did you pick up that skill, would you say? Was that a childhood thing, or is that pure acting training? Like, where do you learn
Not pure acting training. No, I think if you like to observe people and kind of break them down, I think like my uncles, and they really enjoyed like dissecting people's behavior, and they would talk about it a lot. And I thought it was always, interesting. And then there were actors that I loved when I was a kid, like, Charles Lawton or Barbara Stanwyck or James Cagney. And, I would watch them. And, a lot of things that James Cagney did, he picked up from old people in his neighborhood. He talked about how all these moves that he did in the movie was from these people that he grew up with. And human behavior is much more complex sometimes than when we see people, portray that kind of behavior. And sometimes you see something that's so crazy in a movie and you go, wow, they had the audacity, to try it, and it's sometimes really liberating when you see it.
Is it true that your first on-camera credit was as an extra in Raging Bull?
Yeah.
I did not know this.
No, I was.
What do you remember?
I was in a play called Tooth of Crime, off Broadway, and Robert De Niro came to see it with my friend Michael Badalucco, and then they brought us in. We were too young for real parts, but I had read the book because my dad was an amateur fighter, and so we decided to adapt a scene from the book and asked them during our interview if we could perform it. I didn't have a resume picture. I took it in a garage in a 40s jacket, and they were in this room, Scorsese and De Niro, and they were interviewing all these people like off the street basically. And my friend Michael said, we have a scene, and then I came in, they interviewed me, and they said, well, Marty was like, we don't have a script. We don't have a script. I don't understand how you. I said, well, we adapted it, and then we all moved the table, all four of us, and it was a glass table. I remember because it came off the base, and it was because of Bob De Niro, who said, no, let them do it. And it was like a on the waterfront, back seat kind of scene, but it was kind of a quiet scene, and we did it for them, and they got real kick out of it, and they kept bringing us back through this for a year. I was in college at the time, and my mother, and I would go to Marty's apartment, and my mother would say, well, you can't go to his apartment and not, bring something, And so I was like, right. So I would bring him like pastries from Cafe Roma, because my mother told me to bring them, and we would do all these scenes from the movie, but we were too, young. And then Michael got a little part, and they said, but Bob has always remembered it, and I've worked with him many times since, and Marty too. But they were really kind of, that was my first audition. Yeah.
Those are such wonderful memories.
Yeah.
I got so much more out of that question than I thought I would get.
No.
Specific memories.
It was really like, it was
Does it set the tone for the career? Like, how did that set you on a path? No tone. It was a one-off.
No, I went, back to school, and then I was a bartender and a teacher and a carpenter, and then I went to Yale Drama School. But when I did my first a play off Broadway, Bob came to see the play. He came to see it, and he told someone the story who was a friend of mine who came with him to the play, and she said, "Oh, he told me the whole story."
Oh,
yeah. And years later, when I worked with him in a movie that Barry Levinson did, I played his agent. He was a movie producer. He played like Art Linson in the movie. We had drinks after work, and we were all in this room, a bunch of us together, and Bruce Willis was there, and Stanley Tucci, and all these guys. And Bob told him the story, Yeah, and I was sitting there. I was like, I had those auditions. Yeah, I auditioned. Yeah, and Bruce Willis was like, well, that was unbelievable because I was trying to get an audition for that film, and so yeah, it was but it was people who you look up to and were inspired by. So
I think that's what actors, especially actors early in their career, want to hear is from that exact era, and what actors inspired you and what kind of set you on that path. And like, can I ask the question of like, have you ended up where you wanted to be career-wise? And like, how do you think about fighting against typecasting or leaning into
Well, I got out of typecasting pretty easy because there were people like Joel and Ethan who saw me on stage, and they saw me do all different kinds of plays on stage. And, basically the first really kind of big role I had, a great role, was in Five Corners, but John Patrick Shanley fought for me to get because I had done this play of Danny in the Deep Blue Sea in off-Broadway for a long time. And after that, I was offered all the darkest roles, but it was really Joel and Ethan who kind of got me out of that. And once I got out of that, that led to all different other kinds of parts. And then I worked like in Europe with Francesco Rosi. I did a adaptation of a Primo Levi book called La Tregua, and I did Quiz Show. And I mean, they made me into like the intellectual, and I am I'm not a nerd, but I'm a big reader. And on stage, I've done Beckett, and I've done Chekhov, I've done Shakespeare, Ibsen. I've done a lot of different things, Brecht. And so I never wanted to do one thing. And at the beginning, they wanted me to play, violent characters. I've turned down a lot of those characters. I, tried to vary it as much as I could. And then eventually, people saw that I could do some comedy too, and my mother encouraged me. She said, you're funny. And I was like, yeah, well, yeah. But when I first started out, I just wanted to make a living and do material that was well written. And I've gotten, great opportunities. There's a couple opportunities I wish I would have had, or maybe I turned down and I shouldn't have. But overall, I've stayed true to, who I am. I've made my own films. I've worked with a lot of great directors. I've worked in different languages, which is very hard. Especially if you don't speak all the tenses of a language. And I hope that I have more surprises, left in me. I feel still like I'm, learning as an actor, and you still start from zero, even though you have all this experience. And, when I see something, someone who inspires me in a movie, it thrills me. I'm like, wow, look at that. But I've grown up on a lot of classic cinema, a lot of classic foreign cinema, and there are people like I mentioned before, like Barbara Stanwyck. I'm like a big fan of hers. I just get a kick out of watching her walk across a room. Or Burt Lancaster walk across the room. I think. Movement is revealing a lot of times, and there are actors who are transformative actors, and I've always was, attracted to that. I mean, really, I have to say, I grew up, I loved Edward G. Robinson and stuff, but I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me until I saw a clip of the Academy Awards in 1969. I saw Dustin in Midnight Cowboy, and I was shocked. I remember thinking like, this guy looks like someone in my family. I was like, what's he doing there? He was like, and I thought he was good too. And it just like opened up your brain. And then all these other actors came, like Pacino and De Niro and all these guys. And you were like, what's happened? It's opening up a little bit, And I'm, grateful, for a lot of those people.
Total. I mean, I love hearing the philosophy.
Yeah.
It sounds like that philosophy of you want to continue to surprise yourself and like.
Yeah, there are things. I mean, like last year I did a show that I adapted with Ariel Levy of a Philip Roth book and called Sabbath Theater, and that was really challenging to do, and I love doing because I love Roth, and I just love writers, great writers, and so it's a thrill when you're in the. Matter of fact, Pedro loves that book that I did, and he was asking me, well, how did you do all this sex? I said, well, we were on stage. I said, we couldn't really, we could talk about it, but yeah, you want to do things that you think you can't do. That, and a lot of times people ask you to do things that they've maybe seen you do.
That you've already done,
And
yes.
Sometimes it's great when you have that opportunity, and sometimes they just have to wait it out. And I just go, I'm not going to do a variation of a variation of a variation.
Yeah, and maybe go back to the theater where there's more opportunities to like showcase that.
Well,
variety.
That's a real humbling thing to go back to the theater, because
Oh, okay.
you have to really, you're the editor. You don't have an editor to make you look good. You have to understand about variety and musicality and keeping people awake. That's I think a lot of actors that's your first job is to engage people.
That's spot on. That's so great.
So that's it.
As a director, though, because it sounds like directing is, of course, another way that you challenged yourself.
Yeah.
What did you learn as a director? And I want to ask, for, again, especially first-time actors, what do you wish more actors knew that would make them better actors to work with for a director?
Well, it's good if you can hear the other person's dialogue. And if you know the dialogue, and also that, not to make people tense, to create an environment where it's relaxed but focused. And each director has their own personality. Some like to get on with it. Some directors want to do it over and over again. Some want tremendous variation. Everyone is the strength of their personality, and they're also victimized by their personality too. So they're all different. Everyone is different. And there are some directors, like I worked with Peter Weir, and he would put on music. And I was like, this is great. And so I've done that a lot. When people have to do emotional scenes, I play music. Anything they want to choose, sometimes I put it in their ear. Anything. I try to give them as much stimulus as possible. There are a lot of directors who don't think about that. But I've worked with enough directors to know that some people are sensitive to that. And every actor is different. Some don't like to talk, and some like to talk a lot about it. So if you spend time beforehand with them, years ago I had an interview. He was going to make a sequel to America with Elia Kazan, and I went up to his brownstone, and he talked to me for like 4 hours because I guess he heard I was an interesting actor, and he didn't want to know anything about me as an actor. He only wanted to know about me as a person. And by the time I came out of there, I realized, oh, this is why this guy has gotten these performances out of people, because he wants to know the material that he's going to work with and mold. And it was fascinating. It was like talking to my grandfather or something, So you'll learn a lot by those kind of encounters.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about casting too. You've been on both sides of the casting table. What do you remember about auditions, and did you ever have like an audition philosophy?
Well, I try to, if I'm auditioning, I give everyone a good opportunity and ask them for an adjustment. There are some directors don't want any adjustments. They want to see it, right then and there. It's very interesting. Everyone has their own, way of doing it. It's, I mean, I would say that when I auditioned, I was supposed to do a couple things like, which I never did, unfortunately, with Mike Nichols. But Mike Nichols, it was like a party, his audition. It was like, he would ask you to read something, and you say, well, I don't think I'm right for that. But he goes, no, let's try it. And you had a great experience, with him. And some directors, like, they don't really want to give you encouragement. They want to just see it. And when I audition an actor, I want to make it comfortable for them and try to get the most, out of them. And attention doesn't help. Yeah, there are some people think that tension helps, but it doesn't help, even if you're doing a tense scene. So the more relaxed you are, the more access you have to all those different things you need in a scene. So I try to make it an hospitable environment and not a cold, like a dentist visit. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah.
And again,
sometimes that's like it is on the set. Sometimes you feel like, well, I'm going to the dentist today, and that's it. You know, and then I learned like years ago, because there wasn't any monitors, you know, to make friends with the camera operator, the dolly grip, and the focus puller. And they're your friends, you know. And now that they're in another room, so
the room next door.
Yeah. But I love having the director actually on the set and feeling them, you know, smiling or grimacing.
So you can copy their mannerisms.
No. You pick it up. It's like you say, oh, it's
the energy
going well.
of absolutely.
Yeah.
Because as we were saying, like it's all coming from them, and so it comes down to listening. You got to listen to your scene partners and your director.
Yeah, but sometimes the director, just through their body language, like you're on the right track.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's what's like when you plug into another person's brain. That's the joy of that
space between.
Yeah.
Thing.
Yeah. Because you don't want to always use your own references. You know
sure.
what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, so. But, you know, like I say, they're the beneficiary and they're also the victim of their own personality. So when you direct, you figure that out about yourself.
Yeah, you keep that in mind too.
Yeah, so, yeah. But I try to do a lot of rehearsals and things. When I did a movie called Romance and Cigarettes, it was a musical, and I made all these professional actors do like acting exercises because I wanted it to be like a bedroom musical where people sing along, you know, in their bedroom, and I wanted them to be really deeply uninhibited and almost, so I had to get them through the embarrassment stage. And when I asked them to do that, I mean, everyone went to the bathroom. Everyone was like, I have to go to the bathroom. They were like, everybody. And I did it on purpose, and it really did help us. It helped us.
We have to go soon, unfortunately. But the pearls of wisdom that you have dropped today are so valuable, so amazing. You just mentioned this idea of like getting to know the cameraman. Is there anything else earlier in your career that you wish you'd known? Like if you could go back in time and give yourself advice, what would that be?
You know, I mean, I think letting people see themselves like in a daily, you learn from that. You go to dailies and you say, okay, I'm moving my head too much. I can be stiller. I could do less there. You know, when the camera's a certain place, then you know, like, okay, it can pick up what you're thinking. And so there are people who are sensitive to that, and there are people who aren't. And you have to kind of learn that, you know, ask, can I look at something? A lot of directors wouldn't let you see dailies, and there were directors who would. And I learned a lot from that, because there wasn't a monitor, and some directors to this day don't want you to watch, you know, playback or whatever. But sometimes just physically those things help, and what the proximity is. Once I worked with Robbie Mueller, and Robbie Mueller, To Live and Die in L.A., he was placing the camera based on what I did in rehearsal, and then I did a little bit more in the take. And he said, if you would have done that, I would have moved the camera a little further back. And I said, oh, I didn't know that. He said, yeah, but what you were doing was enough. And it was the first person who really talked to me, and he was the DP, but he was very gentle, and I was like, so I kept talking to him throughout the movie, because Billy Friedkin was, you know, he wanted to rock and roll, you know what I mean, and he really helped me, because you're learning a different craft. It's different than the stage, you know what I mean? Yeah, so.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you.